Worshipful Society of Masons. It's a side order. The full name of the order is very, very interesting. The full name of the order is Worshipful Society of Freemasons, Rough Masons, Wallers, Slaters, Paviours, Plastarians, and Bricklayers. You know, this is a society which continues to practice the operative part of Freemasonry. The moral teaching that is given is more on the operative side rather than on the symbolic or the explicit or the spiritual side, speculative side. So it's an organization which continues to have more of operative bias rather than the spiritual. Then there is the society called Royal Order of Scotland. Then the Society of Rosicrucians, again the word Rosicrucian evokes good eyebrows from lot many members. I know because there are certain Rosicrucian orders which are irregular previously, but this Society Rosicrucian happens to be a regular independent order. The Grotto, this is called, it's another very popular order. It's called the Shriners, the Grotto, and the Tall Cedars of Lebanon. And now you wonder why the Masonic Lodge would have a name order has a name, the Tall Cedars of Lebanon. Well, I'm coming to the King Solomon's Temple history, where you would appreciate the Cedar of Lebanon was something that was a very important constituent in building of the King Solomon's Temple. So I just picked up, then there is an order called the Mystic Order of Veiled Prophets of Enchanted Beauty. So you have interesting orders. Anyway, so proceeding further now to the next part, whence come we, where we come from, our own Masonic history. What I talked about is now let's try to trace our root again. Unfortunately, going from history again into deeper history, but that I think is going to help us understand our order. The first thing, the mystic history, the ritual working, the building of big arrays, the building of big Solomon's Temple, that happens to be the most interesting part of mythical history that Freemasonry has adopted. I would not strictly say mythical, but I would say biblical history that Freemasonry has adopted. It continues to be the central theme and continues to be the most fascinating of all Masonic studies. I made a study. About 8 years back, I had published a paper on building of King Solomon's Temple, which was published in P.S. Stone Review and other Masonic journals, international journals. That had inspired me to study deeper into the building of King Solomon's Temple. So I drew references from historical sources. I studied the Old Testament to study what lies there in respect of this particular portion of literature which concerns the building of Solomon's Temple, and I have actually presented a couple of papers on this topic at different Masonic programs, and I found it very fascinating. What we study in the lodge is great work, interesting great work, but there is much more beyond that. So I think we all would be inquisitive to know the real history of how the King Solomon's Temple would be actually built and destroyed and rebuilt, and why basically adopted it as a central theme of Freemasonry and so on. So I would like to spend a couple of minutes on that. I am quoting mostly from biblical sources, but there is a diversion I would be talking about there. But mostly it comes from the Old Testament. Solomon was the son of David and Bathsheba, who was David's wife after David had killed Bathsheba's husband. I don't remember the name now. Their son was Solomon. When he was 20 years old, he inherited the great empire that David had built. And Solomon is said to be the wisest of the wise, and for very valid reasons. Look through the history and you will find that there was no king as wise as Solomon. The most methodical, the most wise, the most calculated, the man with the most logical abilities, who would honor knowledge, who would honor somebody's technical skills, and that again is the reason why Masonry would have chosen it as its central theme. And we say that in the ritual you are taught that the order is derived from the building, from the masons who participated in the building of the King Solomon's temple, derived spiritually or derived editorial that we will just see a little later. Right, was actually built. My brother Abu is he, in fact, when I started, when I came here, Abu said that he had been recently to Jerusalem and was looking for the remnants of the King Solomon's temple. I had promised him I would be explaining to him what happened to the temple that was built and destroyed and rebuilt. So we'll be going through the whole history. And the building and the destruction of the temple, the rebuilding, is the main esoteric theme also in Masonry. You have to destroy the old temple so that you build the new one. I mean, it gets destroyed. You have to, we have a ceremony of actually death. There is a death and there is a rebirth. Stronger, philosophically better, ethically stronger, morally better, and so on. So the whole story can be very easily fitted into the whole of the Masonic spiritual teaching, and it does fit very well, as we used to see. So when he was 20 years old, he inherited the kingdom of David and was considered to be the wisest of men. During King David's time, the Ark of Covenant did not have a permanent home. It was put in what is called tabernacle. Tabernacle is a tent, is a makeshift tent. It was put in a tabernacle, and it was the desire of David that he should build a temple to the glory of Most High, so big and with so much of splendor that the whole world would know that this is a very special temple where the Ark of Covenant resides. And that was the basic, that was the dream that David had. Interestingly, David could not build that house. David wanted always to build that house. David could not build that house because when David, in fact, made a preparation, he started collecting resources. And I've got the details. So David had collected 10,000 talents in gold and 100,000 talents in silver. And 1 talent, to give an idea, is 30 kilograms. It's equal to fill a amphora, a bowl with water. So it's about 30 kilograms. So he had collected 10,000 talents in gold, which amount to 300 tons of gold. 300 tons of gold had been, the history records it to 300 tons of gold he had collected, and 3,000 tons in silver. So that with this money he was going to build the temple. And when he started making the preparation for building the temple, the chief priest Nathan advised against building of the temple. He said that, and I'm quoting from the Bible again, "Thou hast shed blood abundantly and hast made great wars. Thou shalt not build a house unto my name, for those had shed much blood, thou hast shed much blood upon the earth in my sight." He said that God has ordained him not to build the holy house because he has shed much blood. So, on Nathan's advice, David decided not to build the temple. When David was dying, he passed on he bequeathed the whole of the resources that he had collected for building the temple to his son Solomon, and said that the war is over, it's a peaceful time. I had said I was not eligible to build the temple. You are starting afresh. You have a responsibility to build the temple. The dream that I had fulfilled, you have a responsibility to build it to the glory of the Most High. And this is how it started. And in 1000 BC, when David was the king, he had captured Jebus, which is now Jerusalem, and they found the site, the Mount Moriah, to be the, I think which you have visited, to be the appropriate site where the temple could be built, because that was the place where Abraham had decided to sacrifice his son, and that was the place of special historical importance to the community, to the religion. So they thought that the temple must be built at that place at Mount Moriah, which was a very pious and a very sacred site. So the problem with King Solomon was that he was a big military power. He was not a good builder. He was not too much into building cities. He was rather a formidable force. I mean, David and Solomon were considered a big power source, but certainly not good architects and good builders. So So Solomon contacted Hiram, the king of Tyre, who was a good friend of David, and requested him to give his assistance so that the most magnificent temple ever could be built to the glory of Almighty. And to which Hiram readily agreed, and along with his chief architect, which we very well know, Hiram Abid, then he said, I would come and personally supervise the building of the temple. The plan that David had prepared was laid before these three men, and they prepared the real plan of building the temple. And Hiram, when Hiram was the king of Tyre, and I checked up the historical details of what Tyre was. Tyre was a huge area which now is a part of Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey, Syria, Tunisia, Malta, and other countries. So it was a huge area. So Hiram was as big a king as David and Solomon were. So he was requested and he came forward along with his chief artificer, Hiram Abid. And Hiram Abid was said to be a skillful man endowed with understanding of master craftsmanship, skill to work in gold and silver, bronze and iron, stone and wood, purple and blue, fine linen and crimson, and to make any engravings and to accomplish any plan which may be given to him with skill that Solomon and his father David desired. So, with that kind of resource person, we came together and together they built the plan. In gratitude, Solomon gave a tithe or a donation or a contribution to Hiram, consisting of 2,000 tons of wheat, 2,000 tons of barley, 2,000 tons of corn, 400,000 liters of olive oil, and 400,000 liters of wine. Now, that's another reason why corn, wine, and oil would keep coming in our rituals. It has got spiritual significance, it has got a specific significance for people. The wages were paid in this form. So the construction of the temple was started in 757 BC, 21st of April, according to our modern calendar. 70,000 apprentices were put for excavation, 80,000 kilograms were put for polishing of the stones, 30,000 craftsmen were asked to cut the tall cedar coming from Lebanon. Again, the tall cedar of Lebanon comes from here. And 3,300 to oversee the work, and there were 500 chief overseers. So total there were 202, historical records, that is not coming from biblical source, from historical records, there were 2,17,451 people employed together to build the King Solomon's temple. You can imagine how big the task would have been. And Solomon paid the wages himself. It's very interesting. And we've read in the rituals also, the wages were paid in the middle chamber by King Solomon himself. So he paid the wages himself. The wages it was impossible to maintain a register of members. So they were given different sets of workers were given different passwords. So then they could identify themselves as the different skilled workers. You can see the panel. So the worker had to come forward and give his password, and King Solomon would know which category he belonged to, and the wages were paid to him accordingly, and so on. So he was given a certain signed token and word of recognition, which King Solomon could always examine him to be, and then pay his wages to that person. And the two bronze pillars were created hollow, so that the sacred and secret religious scriptures and material could be kept in the two hollow of the two pillars. In the temple, a wooden wall was to be used for the purpose of laying the bricks and fixing them up and constructing. I think I don't have to tell. You can just keep drawing the panel on your own. So a wooden, why a heavy wooden wall was given? Because it would have been an act of sacrilege to make loud noises of metal in the temple, which was to be the most sacred of all places. So with the wooden wall, the bricklayer would fix the brick without making much noise, maintaining the dignity. The place which was to be the most pious temple in the world. So with the wooden wall, they would fix up the brick inside, even if it was inconvenient. They were asked not to use any of the metals inside, and so there was neither a hammer. Again, quoting from Bible, there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard into the house while it was being built. There were three who knew all the plans. We know it well. The King Solomon, Hiram the king, and Hiram was. So King Solomon was had taken upon himself the responsibility of managing and design specification and of distributing the wages himself so that he would interact directly with all the workers. King Hiram was to send the supplies and other logistics, and Hiram was to be the superintendent of building and the temple, the inspector of the work, or the fourth man in this command, you could say, was Adonijah, who was the brother-in-law of Hiram, and he was given the responsibility of supervising the work under the command of these three masters. And Tito Zidok was the high priest who officiated in the ceremonies, and who was the high priest responsible for the pious and the religious working in the temple. One stroke of genius which the wisest of the wise, King Solomon, created was the building of a school of architecture. So he created a school of architecture which was put under the charge of Tito Zidok, the high priest. And in the school, about 50% of the masons had come from Tyre. Rest of them were the Jewish workmen belonging to David and Solomon. So the people who had come from Tyre were expected to interact with the Jewish workers and impart knowledge to them. In order to formalize the system under the supervision of Tito Zidok, they actually set up a Masonic school of architecture, where the knowledge would be passed on. It's like knowledge transfer mechanism that we have now. We keep talking about in management circles. So it was a knowledge transfer mechanism where the skilled workers would pass on the knowledge to unskilled. So a large framework, again you can see the panel. So large framework was set up so that gradually the unskilled workers belonging to the Jewish unskilled workers can also pick up the skills and become trained, and elaborate rules of architectural schools were laid down so that they can learn from the masters and prepare themselves. Another stroke of genius on the part of Solomon was that he divided all the workers, all the Jewish workers, into 12 different tribes that prevailed those days, and made one of the active knights of each of the tribes as the in charge of those 12 tribes. So